a secret World War II Allied base in Albania with an extraordinary backstory.
So this place not only has a history of the guerrilla camp, but also as a waypoint for people escaping capture.
An infamous asylum in the USA that became notorious for a brutal treatment.
Surgeons would literally go into the brain and experiment with damaging or severing certain parts of the brain.
And the underground home of a satanic society with an American founding father among its members.
This is a strange, spooky place, but it has an incredible history of glamour, celebrity, scandal, and debauchery.
Decaying relics and ruins of lost worlds. They were forged by years of toil, but now they are haunted by the past. Their secrets are waiting to be revealed. On the Balkan Peninsula of Europe is what's known as the Land of the Eagle. Deep in the hills of southern Albania are the dramatic remnants of a secret history.
Albania is a mountainous and in some ways beautiful and desolate region.
There's a rugged beauty to this landscape, but it's very, very isolated. It's probably one of the forgotten countries of Europe.
This is a mysterious place. For much of the last century, it was hidden away behind closed doors. And it retains a certain mystique, even today.
There's still a lot of things to be explored in this area. A lot of secrets to be uncovered from those decades.
The isolation was born of a conflict that touched every corner of Europe. Clinging to the hillside overlooking the Bay of Flora is a relic of those troubled times.
This village produced 45 of what Albanians called martyrs, heroes of World War II. This tiny village has a phenomenal tale to tell.
A few miles away is a mysterious cave linked to the village, and that's also connected to a remarkable escape story.
That is a machine gun tripod. That's the smoking gun. This is their guerrilla home. This is their cathedral.
But what were British and American secret agents doing in this remote backwater?
This is a classic World War II story. You've got spies, resistance, smugglers, heroes, villains. This has got it all.
This humble-looking settlement played a key role in secret operations led by British SOE and American OSS agents during World War II. They chose this village as a base from which to wage a guerrilla war. Ex-Special Forces operative Clint Janulis has come here to find out more.
I served in Iraq in the Special Forces, and the U.S. Special Forces are guerrilla warfare specialists. I'm here to understand why the precursors to the modern Spec Ops units decided to choose this abandoned, destroyed village as a base of operations, because it was those groups like the OSS and SOE that basically wrote the playbook on guerrilla warfare that we still use today.
Founded during the war, these organizations coordinated espionage activities behind enemy lines. But to take a closer look at this former base in such rugged terrain requires some serious wheels.
Driving up here, I was trying to put myself in the position of an attacking soldier, and I realized just how terrifying that would be, because getting up here, you see the fortified positions. From down there, there's not much of a view, but you're completely exposed. From up here, you are safe from bullets, artillery rounds, yet you've got a clear field of vision, 270 degrees. Oh, wow. This place looks like it was designed to be a fortress. This is a sniper point, sniper point. You could even have small artillery pieces up here and be protected and secure, and you have a view of the entire valley from this exact location. This is where I would want to fight a guerrilla battle against an invading force down that valley.
Up close, the village displays all the marks of a battleground.
It's obvious that there's been combat here. The mortar on these walls here have these pockmarks in them. Some of them look like the pockmarks you'd see from the impact of a bullet. Some look like the ones you'd see from artillery, which are going to be more dispersed and sort of chaotic looking. The other really important question for me is, who attacked? Where did they come from? Because just behind these two massive fortifications is a funnel of death for anybody trying to get into that village.
Clint's meeting with Sophocles Daupai, whose family lived here before they were displaced by the fighting.
This tile carries the names of my great-grandfather and of my great-great-grandfather.
Stradushi Kasarushi. Kasarushi.
They had 3 rooms, one here, a second here, and a third here. We were at the house of my ancestors, the house of my grandfather, great-grandfather, and of my great-great-grandfather. As you see, what remains is only the ruins. This is because of the Second World War.
This is Tragus, a settlement that dates back to the 6th century BC. It was once home to hundreds of Albanian families just like Sophocles, who had a proud tradition of resisting foreign invaders.
This is a place that has been a center of conflict and on the border of conflict for centuries. These are people who have not had a large connection to the outside world. So they're very insular. They don't like a heavy-handed foreign rule.
For centuries, these villagers fended off Turkish raiders. In 1847, the people of Tragus somehow beat back the soldiers of the Ottoman Empire. So did Turkey's military forces take revenge on Tragus? To get to the heart of the story, Clint is heading out to Vlora Bay, an area littered with the wreckage of war.
For me, I want to understand both sides of the equation. The guerrilla warfare, why a little tiny village like Tragus had so much investment in special operations activities, and out here in this bay, where we had large maritime things going on. And I want to check out the shipwreck, because that's going to help me understand the conventional side.
As you move through the murky waters, emerging into different parts of the ship, you can almost imagine the people walking around, going about their business.
Holy cow! That was amazing. That was absolutely incredible. You could see all the holds in the ship. You could see the outline. You could see where the engine was, or it looked like an engine. Man, and it was perfectly crystal clear. But that was fantastic. That's the best shipwreck I've ever had the opportunity to check out.
Exploring the wreckage further throws up some questions and a few surprises. Which high-profile passenger was this ship carrying? And how is it linked to the attack on Tragus? Ex-Special Forces operative Clint Janulis has come to explore a shipwreck in Albania, which is part of the secret history of the region.
This ship has been the victim of a devastating attack. But this doesn't look like a warship. There's no sign of guns or turrets. So what happened?
This ship is a testimony to a time before the outbreak of World War II, when the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini took the world by surprise by attacking the main Albanian ports, including Vlora, which lies near Tragus.
Mussolini was looking at expanding this Italian empire. Albania was an easy grab for the Italians. Mussolini wanted this piece of territory that was just across the Adriatic from Italy.
When Mussolini's forces crossed Albania's southern border into Greece, Great Britain stepped in and began to target Italian ships in the region. One of these was the Po, and in March 1941, she was sunk by British torpedo bombers.
In the darkness, and with its lights off, the British airmen believed this was a legitimate wartime target. They had no idea what this ship actually was and who was on board.
The Po was, in fact, a hospital ship, evacuating wounded Italian soldiers from the Greek-Albanian front.
By coincidence, one of the nurses aboard this hospital ship was Mussolini's own daughter.
Edda Ciano, Mussolini's daughter, survived the attack, but the sinking was part of a campaign that was soon costing Italy dear.
The Italians are losing on every front. Equipment, leadership, morale is breaking down. They're trying to maintain their control of key areas, and certainly the coastal region in Albania is considered by the Italians as a key area.
The Albanian resistance sensed an opportunity, and Tragus became both a base and supply point for local guerrillas, who now took the fight to the Italians.
The guerrillas decide to make a fight of it, and in this case, they do very, very well, and they cause very heavy casualties because in this terrain, it's ideally suited for guerrilla-style defense.
Clint has returned to Tragus to investigate why it became a focal point of the resistance movement.
Essentially, I'm making a sort of logistical reconnaissance of this village. The tactical advantages of this village are pretty obvious right away. Thick walls, rough terrain, good strong buildings. But really what I'm interested in is the logistics. Armies win and lose based on logistics. Special operations units specialize in inverting the logistical chain. Most armies rely on large numbers, large logistics chains. Spec ops, small numbers. Find the weak point in the army's big logistics chain, cut it in half. In the logistics war, water is crucial. And this isn't just a well, this is a natural spring, which means hydrostatic pressure is pushing water out. They've got water year-round. Anybody attacking from up the hill, they'd have to haul their water up. Now, yeah, this is cool. This reminds me a lot of Greek villages I've been in that were designed to be windy and mazy, basically to defend against pirates, which meant anybody that was trying to come in and attack by foot would get run through corridors and mazes and funnel points, which we call funnels of death.
With these advantages, the guerrillas were making life a nightmare for the Italian army. They were able to pick off troops and harass infantry columns with lightning hit-and-run raids. Eventually, Italian Colonel Franco Clementi brought in a whole division to re-establish control of Tragus and the 4 other villages in the area.
On New Year's Day 1943, there was a massive pitched battle where 2,000 very well-equipped Italians were beaten by the local Albanian guerrilla forces. This David versus Goliath battle ended in victory for the Albanians.
Despite increasing his troop numbers to well over 5,000 men, outnumbering the Albanians by 3-1, Colonel Clementi was himself killed as his forces suffered a humiliating defeat. But repercussions soon followed. Mussolini's forces returned to Tragus to take their revenge. This time, their targets were civilians.
Italians came here first, and it is said they even hit the village with mortar fire from the mountain peak of Chapiu, above the village of Oricum. Then, when they burned the village, they alienated the villagers even further.
Despite the reprisals, the Italian army was disintegrating. And so the Allies sent undercover units to support the local resistance fighting against Mussolini's crumbling occupation. And the Nazis, who were also closing in on Albania. British agent Jerry Field based his team here in Tragus.
Jerry Field was this very daring operative for the SOE. And he came in with a small group of men and initially set up shop right in Trajas and worked with the local partisans, relayed information back to the British, tried to supply local partisans who were fighting the Nazis, and basically trying to figure out how to do as much damage to the Germans as possible without actually having to commit any British troops except for him and his very small team.
Field's principal task was to smuggle in arms from Italy, which had been invaded by the Allies.
Once the Americans and British land in 1943 and occupy southern Italy, it's only a very short hop from a major Italian port like Bari across the Adriatic into Albania. It's very easy to supply guerrillas by boat. And of course, you send in small teams to make contact with the guerrillas and you supply them.
Yet Clint has discovered the British secret agent suddenly abandoned Tragus. He's been given coordinates for a location that will help him understand why.
Even today, it's really hard to find. It's not on the map, and most locals don't know where it is or that it even exists. I didn't expect to find this, and this tells quite a lot because this is a British machine gun mount, and it says right here, Mark IV, 1942, and then you'd have the ability to mount a really heavy machine gun on this, and anybody coming up that hill would have faced a barrage of gunfire. But also, this thing is heavy. I've carried machine gun mounts before. We can't be too far from the cave. We're getting close. Okay. This isn't just a rock overhang. This goes really deep. Oh, this has got to be the place. That is a machine gun tripod. That's the smoking gun. This is their guerrilla home. This is their cathedral.
But how is this cave linked to a remarkable American escape story?
Just looking at this makes me really think, yeah, it's a great guerrilla hideout, but this is potentially a really horrible death trap. Couple hand grenades thrown down in here, and look at all these. These are gonna you'll just die under a mass of stalactites. And that is something I'm sure they thought about constantly. It could have just even been as simple as a bomb landing just overhead the cave. Imagine being right here, and 500-pound bomb lands.
Agent Field led his team down from the mountains above Tragus to this place, Seaview Cave. A perfectly camouflaged hideaway near a dogleg cove used to smuggle arms and supplies into Albania. For months, Field and his team survived here on mule meat and rainwater.
I can't imagine how surreal it would have been to live here every day and then go fight, pick up illicit supplies from the coast, go sabotage the enemy, and then come back to this and have a meal of hot mule.
After being forced out of Tragus when the Nazis rolled into Albania in September 1943, Field's team now had to coordinate resistance from this extraordinary cave. But it would soon prove to be more than just a secret base. It was also to play a key role in an incredible escape story.
An American plane that was carrying 13 American nurses ran low on fuel and got lost in bad weather. They crash landed in a field in the middle of Albania in the middle of winter.
Trapped in Nazi-occupied territory with no food or supplies, local partisans smuggled the nurses out of the Albanian interior across the snowy mountains towards the coast.
They had to dodge German patrols. At one point, they got caught up when the Germans were invading a particular town, and the group got split up, but they all survived and were able to keep moving on.
After eventually making contact with the SOE, they brought the nurses to this cave. And Clint, himself a combat medic, believes he may have found some evidence from their time here.
Oh. This is World War II medical gauze. It looks just like the medical gauze we use today, from a med kit from 76 years ago. Wow. You can even see the cotton stitching in it still. That's pretty cool.
How did the nurses manage to complete one of the most remarkable escapes of the Second World War? In Albania, 13 American nurses were trying to evade the clutches of the Germans during World War II. To complete an extraordinary escape, Allied agents led the nurses to a secret cove where an American boat was waiting to take them to Allied-controlled Italy.
So after walking hundreds of miles in the middle of winter through some of the roughest terrain I can imagine, the nurses managed to hook up with the SOE, who were fortunate enough to be able to have arranged transportation that day. So they came down this crazy ravine and valley that I just walked, and the first thing they see is this gorgeous Smuggler's Cove, and that's their ticket home.
So in the end, they wound up traveling between 600 and 800 miles on this incredible survival escape march. It's one of the great survival stories of World War II.
But while the nurses were heading home, the villagers and partisans were still in a war zone. This was their home. For them, there was no escape. Clint wants to find out what became of them after Field's unit left Tragus.
How did the Nazis respond when they found out about the heavy resistance movement going on right here in this village?
They came in and they burned. They ruined everything. You can see only ruins remain here. That's why the population abandoned the village and resettled elsewhere. They were left with nothing here but bare walls and ruins.
The Germans decided to raze this village to the ground. Well, the British and American agents that had been working with the villagers were sitting on these hillsides, watching as this group that they had known, cared about, lost every single thing they had in one fell swoop.
The Nazis left the settlement engulfed in flames. Sofo explains how it made his family even more determined to take the fight back.
My eldest uncle joined the partisans, the 5th Brigade. He even went with them to fight the Germans up to Yugoslavia.
I really loved hearing Sofo's story because it reminds me that World War II was such a big, complex mess. And a lot of people, particularly in the United States, had family members who served and took great risk and may have died or been injured. In little tiny villages all over Europe, just like this one, every day people had to make decisions about whether or not they were going to resist and fight. Decisions they made here could have resulted in their entire family being executed. They were fighting for their homelands. They were working with the SOE and the Office of Strategic Services, and doing so at great risk to their family's life, their lives, and their community's lives.
Today, a memorial to the partisans stands here in the rubble, a fitting monument to their brave resistance against the forces of fascism. On the banks of the Fork River, deep in the heart of West Virginia, USA, there's an enormous structure with an incredible story to tell.
It's an incredibly imposing building, like something from the colonial era. It looks like it was laid out for some vast civic purpose.
And there's a whole lot of other buildings around it, almost like it's some kind of a college campus. You can see that it was a major project in its day.
Inside, there's a confusing picture about the purpose of this strange place.
There's something a bit eerie about the juxtaposition between the children's toys and the serious medical instruments.
When you look inside, it's a mess. I mean, clearly it's abandoned, neglected. There's peeling paint. There's bars over some windows and doors. It has a forbidding quality.
This was clearly a place designed to keep people in, but not those convicted of a crime.
This place emerged out of an enlightened view. It was meant to be a haven for people who were cast out from the world.
What started as a really noble experiment quickly degenerated into a real horror show of abuse.
What turned the dream into a nightmare? And who were the inhabitants forced to call this place home? Construction here began in the mid-1800s. In time, these halls would witness terrible things that left their mark on the building and on the surrounding community. Its purpose was the management of the clinically insane. 2 centuries ago, mental illness was viewed very differently than it is today. Those showing signs of it were thought to be possessed by demons.
The treatment of mental health back in the early 19th century was almost worse than a death sentence. Families with members who had mental health problems often hid them away. Those who weren't lucky enough to be able to do that had their relatives simply carted off and locked up.
Mental health was never really understood. There were a lot of supernatural explanations. I mean, even the word lunatic comes from the idea that it was somehow inspired by the moon.
But one forward-thinking doctor would stand as a beacon of hope. His name was Dr. Thomas Kirkbride.
Dr. Kirkbride was one of those rare reformers. He saw a new way, a new world in which people could be treated and cared for and cured. And key to that was the provision of a healthy, open, normal environment. This place was going to be his masterpiece.
This is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
In the mid-19th century, ideas about mental illness were finally changing. And the asylum was designed as a place for the most progressive, scientific, and humane treatment of the mentally ill.
Kirkbride wanted to move away from the prevailing model in which the mentally ill might be chained in city jails. And so instead, one of the main buildings is this huge structure that was designed so that sunlight and air could easily come in, as opposed to sort of damp, dank cells.
Originally intended to house 250 people, patients were given the freedom to walk the long, bright corridors and enjoy the lovingly manicured grounds. But before long, Kirkbride's great humanist vision would be twisted beyond all recognition.
The understanding of mental illness was still very much in its infancy. Patients were being referred with conditions like fits or superstition or loss of limbs or even asthma.
This is a time period in which women who behaved in unconventional ways could be deemed insane and sent away. A whole range of people who did not necessarily conform to societal expectations might be considered as having a nervous condition that required treatment.
At its height, the asylum was crammed with 2,600 patients, more than 10 times its capacity. As the numbers increased, so did the depths of the depravity, as Rebecca Gleason, who manages the site, has discovered.
Unfortunately, because of all the different people that were coming in and not able to leave, they weren't getting fixed. It became like warehousing.
Not only did such overcrowding lead to people sleeping on the floors, but it completely worked against the therapeutic atmosphere that the asylum was meant to engender.
But worse was still to come. Soon, the hospital was inundated with dangerous, criminally insane inmates from nearby prisons.
We have to remember that there are so many different types of patients that were here. You've got mentally challenged patients. You've got someone suffering from depression, bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, all different types of aspects of mental illness. And then you have the criminal predator that was added to the situation as well.
It sounds like it became a hellish place to be. There were actually murders, there were assaults, and I can imagine just an atmosphere of fear all the time.
But the violence and terrible conditions were just the tip of the iceberg.
Understanding of the brain and mental disorders, it was still very rudimentary, and treatments were experimental and often brutal. And in the 1950s, the treatments would become even more grotesque when the center became the home of the West Virginia lobotomy project.
The man behind it all was Dr. Walter Freeman. He is known as the father of the lobotomy.
To perform an ice pick lobotomy, they would take this long, sharp piece and they would point it towards the corner of your eye. They would ting it once to break through your skull, and the second time to basically get into your prefrontal lobe. And they go back and forth, something like a windshield wiper does in your vehicle.
The belief was that patients who suffered from obsessive behaviors had fixed circuits in their brains. Surgeons would sweep the rods from side to side and physically cut the connections.
It's astonishing, almost barbaric to modern eyes. But back then, even the sister of a US president chose to undergo one of Freeman's lobotomies.
Rosemary Kennedy had her operation by Freeman, and she was lobotomized. She ended up spending the rest of her life, 50+ years, in a mental hospital, only being able to mumble a couple words and not anything comprehensively.
Had this procedure not been done to her brain, she might not necessarily have had to have been institutionalized.
It just left many of these patients a shell of their former selves. They sat around passively. So maybe they weren't raging, in hallucinations, but they also weren't anything like a healthy person with an intact mind.
How any surgeon, let alone a brain surgeon, could have thought that sticking a metal rod through the eye and rummaging it around in the brain indiscriminately was helpful is beyond belief.
What happened to the Trans-Allegheny Asylum, and what became of the patients there? Most of them would never leave. The only area that was expanded to accommodate more people was the graveyard.
We're in our morgue. Unfortunately, thousands of people died at the asylum over the last 130 years. Now, this freezer here, basically 2 bodies would lay in there and be able to stay cool. Now, at one point in time, the walls were lined with these refrigerators.
But in 1994, the doors of the asylum were finally closed, and at last, the years of neglect were at an end.
You can only imagine how horrified Dr. Kirkbride would have been if he'd seen what became of his visionary asylum that he had so many hopes for, and it turned into really such a hellhole that didn't help patients, and in many cases made them worse.
Today, the hospital lies abandoned, a disturbing reminder of a well-meaning project that went terribly, tragically wrong.
It's an eerie place to visit. Some of those horrors just don't go away. They live on in the space in some way, shape, or form.
"30 miles west of London is a scene typical of the English countryside. But set amongst the beautiful rolling hills is an opening to a subterranean world.
There's this incredible Gothic entrance, but then when you enter, you go deeper underground and you end up in these sinister-looking caves.
dark chambers with heavy metal gates, almost like cells, are hidden away.
This is a strange and spooky place, but yet it has this incredible history of glamour and celebrities and dignitaries, but above all, debauchery.
How did these caves become infamous? And how did one of America's founding fathers become embroiled in the controversy? The origins of these subterranean passageways date back to the mid-1700s. Their history is filled with tales of pagan rituals, the dark arts, and scandalous depravity. Jack Orr is a historian at the site.
These caves go a quarter of a mile underground, and the thing that's so incredible about it is that it's not at all natural in any way. It's completely 100% man-made, which 250 years ago, that's just an incredible feat of human engineering.
The elaborate network excavated to provide the chalk that would help to build the Great West Road to link this area and London.
What these caves became is actually shocking. It sounds like the thing of myth and legend, but this is real life.
So we're about to go into the heart of the caves, and this is where the very mundane story becomes slightly more macabre.
These are the Hellfire Caves, home to one of the most secret societies in British history.
The Hellfire Club was made up of some of the most famous and respected men of the age. At its forefront was the owner of the caves, Sir Francis Dashwood.
Sir Francis Dashwood was a rather wealthy man. He was born into landed gentry. And just like other men of his status at that time, he spent his final years of education visiting the royal courts of Europe, sampling the intellectual arts and all of the treasures that the continent had to offer.
It was in Italy that he found his true passion, and it was here that Sir Francis Dashwood began to revel in the study of the forbidden arts, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries, which were the most famous secret ancient Greek initiation cult.
Inspired by what he had seen and heard, Dashwood returned home to set up the exclusive Hellfire Club on his family estate.
There were lots of rumors of nefarious deeds. It was whispered that men practiced all manner of black magic and satanic rites in these caves.
It wasn't just dark satanic worship that the members liked to do. They also knew how to party.
Women were brought in from London to join the frolics dressed as nuns, and comely local nymphs were hired and allegedly laid out on altars so men could lick holy wine from their navels.
In the Hellfire Club's days, there would have been curtains across and beds inside this chamber. If you look at the back wall, we still have the original tally marks from where the men were keeping score when they took their prostitutes inside here.
Incredibly, the shocking antics were carried out by some of the most famous men of the day. They included one of the most influential figures in the United States.
Some of the members of the Hellfire Club were very famous, but one of the most famous members was William Hogarth, the artist. And some of his art is actually down our caves. But the odd thing is the most devilish figure who matched Dashwood in debauchery was actually an American.
Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, was a good friend of the Dashwoods. And he would frequently visit the UK, and when he did, he would attend these scandalous parties deep underground.
Franklin loved the fun, prankish nature of the club that he found here. He often wrote home to his friends in Philadelphia about Dashwood and his friends. One of the letters even said, Dashwood's genius is just as apparent above the earth as it is below the earth.
With so much to lose, these powerful men went to great lengths to make certain word of their nefarious activities stayed hidden.
To try and protect their reputations, members of the Hellfire Club took assumed identities.
Your reputation was everything in those days. You say the wrong thing and you're out. And devil worshipping, keeping anything about black magic, any of those sort of books, that was still illegal, that was still a crime.
Much of what happened there is unknown, and a lot of the documentation has been burnt or destroyed in order to cover up the scandal.
Even though the members of the Hellfire Club were sworn to secrecy, word inevitably got out.
It seems the antics of the Hellfire Club were somehow leaked to the public. Rumor has it that it was an old member of the club that exposed it for what it really was.
And the public outrage took its toll. So in 1766, the club was closed down.
With the doors to his very colourful club now closed, Dashwood is said to have lived a more wholesome life until his death in 1781.
This incredible flint structure is another creation of Dashwood. It's the mausoleum for his family, but like everything, there is a darker side to this creation.
Dashwood and his 4 wives were all buried here, as is one other member of the Hellfire Club who was part of a strange story.
So there used to be an urn in the middle of this mausoleum, and in that urn was the heart of Paul Whitehead, and he was a former poet and the head steward of the Hellfire Club.
Whitehead's heart lay here peacefully for almost a century, until the Victorian era.
Now, the Victorians were weird. They loved death, they loved gore, so they made this a tourist attraction.
It's rumoured that his heart was stolen by Australian visitors around 100 years ago. And ever since, people say they've seen him wandering the caves and the hills, holding the place where his heart should have been, looking for it in the grounds.
Today, the Hellfire Caves are open to the public. And for those wanting to channel the spirit of Dashwood, they can even be hired for private parties.
Because of the dark, debaucherous history of the Hellfire Club, they have left this lingering legacy behind, and now we are meant to be one of the most haunted sites in all of England.
Now they're abandoned, crumbling ruins. Many remind us of dark times, but some were once beacons of hope and progress, lasting testimonies to human imagination, enterprise, and spirit.